Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Tom.
And my name is Adam.
Yeah, I was going to say...
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Back for another week.
Adam's not here. Yeah, you have to say it. Adam's not here.
Mm-hmm.
He sends his apologies, I hope, unless he's being a real prick and just be like, no, I don't make any apologies for not being around. Screw my fans. I hate them.
Yep. Both of them. And he said, don't want to do the podcast this week. I'm busy just enjoying myself in Queensland. And I don't want to do that. So go to hell.
It's a real dick move, Adam. Yeah, and I guess we'll have to have a chat when he comes back because dead to us in Queensland.
As far as I'm concerned, yeah. They don't have internet in Queensland, haven't you heard? So speaking of going to hell, Donald Trump. So you might have heard it is the closing week of the 2024 American election, which is set to happen November 5th, Tuesday. So it'll be Wednesday, our time here in Australia. We're probably
going to wake up Wednesday morning to some news. I don't think Wednesday's done by then, but it'll have been well underway, so we'll have an idea of how it's going.
We'll probably get some news by Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, I think. Yeah, sort of overnight American time. So there's been a lot of stuff happening. The closing arguments is what they call it, the last week of the campaign, where the campaigns really want to put their best foot forward and make sure that they project an image of themselves as being a steady hand for American voters and having competence and the capability to run the country and to really make that argument as vociferously as possible. Draw the final outline of what it is people will have in their minds when they go into the voting booth on Tuesday. And as a result of that, Donald Trump has just very cleverly crafted a political campaign event where he's getting in a garbage truck. And this makes perfect sense because Donald Trump is trash.
Yes, I was going to say in the spirit of that, he got in the wrong end of the truck. He got in the main cabin, which got Donnie close. You were on the right track. You belong in the truck. Just
just in the arse end of it.
Up front. Yeah. People sit up front. You belong in the compactor spot, where they'll just crush you into a fine ooze.
There was nice. And I feel like were he to be crushed, the ooze would be particularly oozy because I don't know if you've seen the photo in this article, but they've turned the bronzer up to 11. I don't know what happened.
Where he looks like all those sex dolls they sold after the 2016 election, just all those inflatable ones where he's bright, cartoonishly orange and also doing the perfect mouth shape and then lips. The hands. He's like, oh man, it's one of those pictures, much like him at the McDonald's, we talked about recently, that you're like, this is AI generated.
Surely this can't be real.
Nope. It's exactly as crazy as it seems.
You know what it reminded me of? Do you remember that episode of The Simpsons where I think it was Homer invents a makeup gun?
Oh,
it's a shotgun. And he shoots Marge in the face and it comes out with clown makeup. That is, that's what it reminds me of.
Well, and also Trump, similar to that, because I think Marge's response is, I don't think women are going to like being shot in the face. And Homer says, women will like what I tell them to like, which Trump essentially said in a recent speech.
He said, my people are telling me, they're begging me. They say, please, sir, don't say it. But I'm going to be the protector of women, no matter what they say, no matter what women want.
Whether the women want it
whether they want it or not. And it's
God.
The guy who has been found liable for sexual assault and forced to pay $83 million should not be uttering any sentence which ends in whether they like it or not. There have been 26, checks notes, as we've been speaking, 27 women that have come forward with credible sexual assault allegations against Donald Trump. There is no universe in which he should be ending any sentence with whether they like it or not. And yet, you'll be surprised to learn that this piece of shit is not, in fact, polling at 23% nationally. It's more or less a dead heat.
Yeah, it's one of those. I know with polls, like the what the polls said in 2016 and what the polls said in 2020 and all that sort of stuff. And it always depends who's running the poll,
Sure.
because they're like really biased at skewing who they talk to and all this sort of stuff. But so there's hope, but Jesus Christ, yeah, this week has shown that it's beyond disappointing. Like, everyone's been digging up all the old stuff, like, George, I know you mention it a lot, like when the first things out of his mouth when he said he was running for president was like calling
Mexicans
Mexican
are rapists.
migrants rapists.
That was day one, 2015.
It was like, yeah, day one, people, I saw someone today actually point out that the Access Hollywood tape, the whole grab 'em by the pussy comment, has hit TikTok. And they're seeing like people who are maybe like 19, 20 now.
Who weren't voters in 2016.
Weren't voters in 2016, kind of picking it
yeah.
up there. And it's having a resurgence again. So like maybe the young'uns might come and save us all.
So currently Harris is running at and this is according to 538, which is basically a statistical sort of averages out a bunch of different credible polling. Has Harris at a 1-point national lead against Donald Trump. They've got Harris at 47.9%, Trump at 46.9%. So she's, sorry. Oh, no, that was yesterday's. Today's is 48% and is 46.8%. So 1.3% ahead nationally. But in the swing states, Democrats are up 1 point in Wisconsin, 1 point in Michigan. Pennsylvania is like a percentage of a point, like a 0.1 of a percentage ahead. It's basically a dead heat. Nevada, Republicans are up 1. Georgia, Trump's up 2. North Carolina, Trump's up 2. So it's like it literally is going to come down to Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. Like where the way Pennsylvania goes could decide this entire election. It's actually fucking crazy. Like, you know what it reminds me of? My wife said to me the other day. So she goes, "So how are things going with the election? Like, I know it's coming up." And I said,
she's like, she comes to ask you.
Yeah.
Like, I know, like, new mum, you're both new parents.
Yeah.
Like, all sorts of stuff. It's like, no, I'm not plugged in what's going on. Is it going fine?
It is not going fine. She said, so how's it all going? Like, how's the polling looking? Because she knows I get in there and I look at 538 and I sometimes look at the crosstabs and everything. And I said, the quest stands on the edge of a knife. Stray but a little and it will fail to the ruin of all.
Yeah.
Which is basically where we're at. It's looking bad. And yet, with all of that said, like the Trump campaign spent this week doing the most batshit insane level stuff. So
just running around. Like,
they did a rally at Madison Square Garden, which is in New York, which, in case you're wondering, not up for contention. I think they were just
are not fans of Donald Trump.
No, overwhelmingly Democratic. I think like 2/3 kind of like, solid Democrats. But basically, I think what I heard some of the commentators saying was something to the, Scaramucci was like, no, he just wanted to be in front of a big crowd. Like, yes. And the thing is, there's also like a kind of a reference to a Madison Square Garden rally, which happened in the 1930s, which was like an explicitly Nazi rally. And this was kind of like a callback to that they were trying to call, and there were a lot of comparisons. Anyway, so during this rally, there's I know.
Sorry, wait.
Yeah.
What?
Yep.
They were intentionally trying
That's what it seems to be.
To make an homage to a Nazi rally.
That's the running theory currently.
Like, they've always seemingly had some kind of small plausible deniability in that, like they weren't ever as overt kind of about it. But that's
and some people said like Trump just wanted to play the Garden because New York is not in contention. He doesn't go there a lot, and so there are places that he goes in the swing states where they're not getting big crowds because people aren't turning out because he's been there so much. So they, saying, okay, well, the campaign kind of wanted a big event, a high energy crowd to kind of like buoy up Donald's spirits, I guess. And by going to New York, and it's also kind of like a power play. You're like, oh, look, we're in, Democratic control, stronghold New York. Like, we're feeling so confident about this that we're going to areas that, otherwise wouldn't plausibly be considered swing states. But like, it's all a bit of a front. Anyway, the point is they had a bunch of speakers at this rally, and this rally Did you catch any of this? Like any of the speakers that spoke at this?
I think
or
only sort of the highlights,
the,
and, you know, and
the lowlights, as it were.
Yeah, and the cause of the garbage truck visit. Because
Yes.
there's context there, which I assume you're about to get
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
So.
It's where the garbage truck, we see Donald Trump, like the best part of that video is he reaches out to grab the handle of the garbage truck and then like misses and kind of like falls over. So like there's one of his aides is like, oh, like he's tottering over, like he's about to catch him sort of thing.
Yeah, like I know.
And he like struggles to get up into the truck. He's like, he's an old man. Like,
that's the thing. Yeah, I know people like to cherry pick all these, like they were doing it, like even though I know Biden's older than time, he's older than Israel.
Don't worry, we'll get we'll get to Biden. Don't worry.
But like, you know, where people were like cherry picking all the clips of him like looking old as hell. So I know I've seen people doing that a lot with Trump, but yeah, a lot of some of the recent things I've seen, he does not look well. Like, yeah, that he kind of, I remember that stumble you're talking about going up to the truck. It wasn't like that he like overshot it. He kind of went like,
he had to reach for it and then got like
leg.
he got like 95% of the way to the door handle and then just missed it and was like relying on the weight of the door handle to keep him up and just kind of like staggered. It was very, not good.
His leg just swung out and then back. I was just like, you, what? Like, you'd think anyone else was maybe drunk. But he famously doesn't drink, so that's even like more concerning.
Even though he did, as it turns out, I learned this week, used to sell a brand of super premium vodka.
Oh, of course.
Naturally.
Yeah.
Anyway, so during this Madison Square Garden, you know, rally. I'm going to keep that in my head, what I was thinking. This reminiscent of the Nazi rally in the 30s. There were lots of different speakers, and they all had a bunch of like really cooked shit to say about Kamala Harris and the Democrats. You know, saying that, you know, one of the speakers said, I think it was Giuliani. One of the speakers said like, yeah, she's the Antichrist, and like, you know, like a lot of like very racist, awful, terrible, vitriolic, dark, you know, poisoning the blood of our nation type shit that people have grown to expect at Trump rallies. Anyway, the main breakthrough thing that happened this week was, for some reason, the jokes of Tony Hinchcliffe. Now, for those who don't know, Tony Hinchcliffe is a comedian very closely aligned with like Joe Rogan and that whole sort of like Rogan verse, right? He does this show called Kill Tony. Now, Kill Tony, it's like a dirty roast like comedy show. He's a roast comic essentially, right?
Right.
And so he tells a lot of, you know, very dirty jokes, and like he likes being that sort of like cutting edge, edgy kind of comedian.
Yeah, edgelord. Yeah, okay.
And they do some like long form improv. I saw there was a little while back they had like a guy playing Trump and a guy playing Biden on, and they kind of had him on for the whole show. And
was that show?
That was Kill Tony.
That clip. Yeah. Okay. Right. Yeah.
So that's Tony Hinchcliffe's show. Now it's definitely not a mainstream show, but like clearly Joe Rogan thinks it's great because he bigs him up all the time, and he's been a guest on the Joe Rogan Experience, you know, several times. I know because up until the pandemic, I used to listen to Joe Rogan. I don't anymore until he started on the vaccine, you know, misinformation and mask nonsense. So anyway, so it's the comments from comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, which have broken through. So we'll play just like it's just one line really seems to be the thing that's broken out. So let's hear it.
There's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Yeah. So, like a de rigueur racist kind of shitty joke at the expense of the Puerto Ricans. Like, it's certainly not like earth-shattering, but for whatever reason, it's so hard for me to know what are going to be the things that break through in terms of like political communication and the things that resonate. And the reason this has become a problem is because there's several 100,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania, in various cities. When, as we know, as we just mentioned, Pennsylvania, a swing state. So a few thousand votes either way could potentially swing that state and thus the election. So, and this has been really resonating. Democrats have been amplifying that message on social media. There was a clip of the woman who played April Ludgate in Parks and Recreation. The actress's name escapes me at the moment.
I didn't watch Parks and Rec. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, everybody. I know I should probably have seen some of that.
Played by Aubrey Plaza.
Right. Okay.
Aubrey Plaza. And basically she says, it reminds me, if my dear old grandmother was like, she's Puerto Rican. She goes, if my dear old grandmother was alive, I know she would have one thing to say to Tony Hinchcliffe, and that would be, go fuck yourself. I was like, amazing. Perfect delivery. No notes.
And I know like heaps of Puerto Rican celebrities
Yes.
have amplified this.
Yeah.
And like rallied a base, essentially.
So, which has been really interesting. And then, obviously the far right news, distortion machine kicked into effect and tried to say, well, actually it's the Democrats that are being racist because reasons. And it probably didn't help that Joe Biden got on the horn and said this.
And just the other day, a speaker at his rally called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of seen as unconscionable, and it's un-American. And just
so,
yeah, I find this fascinating because I'd heard the clip, and so it's like, oh no, because people latched onto it. Halloween was just the other day, and a running Halloween costume from a lot of right-wing shitheads was dressing up in garbage bags.
Like, Americans, honestly,
garbage.
Americans are so fucking dumb, man. Honestly, these Republicans are just something else. Honestly,
yeah. But the official White House in this article that we can link in the show notes here, the official White House transcript has that written in a specific way that changes the context of the sentence. Because while that sounds like he said the only garbage I see are his supporters.
Supporter apostrophe S.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what the
and so they're
transcript
basically
has.
what they're saying is no. He's not saying that Trump supporters are garbage. He's saying that the only garbage that's floating out there is that of his supporters. It's possessive apostrophe, which means that
the rest of the sentence is like the demonization of Latinos, like So saying the garbage is So whether that's White House spin because old Biden just said some bullshit,
1,000%. Yeah, there is no doubt in my mind that he just like had a brain. I don't know. This is the thing. Who is like begging Joe Biden to get out on the campaign trail for Kamala? Why is he in a Latinos Zoom meeting, doing commentary on this? Like, and then obviously, of course, this sparked the right wing insanosphere. And saying, Marco Rubio came out on stage. He's like, I have terrible news. And he's like, got this big smile. They called us garbage. Like, they're all thrilled about it because it's something that they can run on. It's another, what they think is another Hillary deplorables, basket of deplorables moment. And they're saying, see, they hate you. But then people have gotten and then immediately done supercuts, very extensive, long supercuts of Donald Trump calling Democrats garbage, calling them scum, calling them vermin, saying that, them and immigrants are poisoning the blood of our country. And, like these are all things that we've heard him say recently. Like, and so for them to act all offended when their guy is the piece of shit offender in chief, saying that Kamala is a very low IQ vice president and that she's, that she's a shitty vice president. Like this guy has been personally responsible for lowering the bar when it, with regard to American political communications over the last 9 years. So for them to turn around and act all fucking outraged, because to my ear, it does sound like Biden saying that the supporters are garbage. But also, I don't care. They are garbage. Like, let's real talk. If you support Donald Trump at this stage after everything he's said and done, you're a garbage piece of shit. And I'm sorry if that makes you, like, the facts over feelings, people seem to have a lot of fucking feelings about it. They call everyone else snowflakes and they're like, no, but I'm garbage. I'm going to do a special costume to show you how offended I am. Fuck you.
Yeah.
But what happened to gender affirming clothing? I identify as garbage, so I'm gonna dress up as garbage for Halloween. Fuck these people, man. Honestly,
No, the thing that really made me grumpy, if this is White House spin in the transcript,
100% it is. Yeah,
it's grammatically incorrect.
It should be supporters S apostrophe for if it's a possessive
it should be
apostrophe.
Supporters, then I think it's on the end.
I think it is different in American.
Transcript.
I think American grammar might be different in that regard. I could be wrong about that.
Oh, I don't know about that. But
By the way, none of Trump's supporters can fucking read, so I don't think any of this really matters.
Touche. But their transcript is then implying, no, one single supporter and their opinion on Latinos is what he said
is the only garbage he sees floating out
so,
there.
Yeah, there we go. So it feels like a real Mike McClintock in Veep kind of mistake to make.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of the Lionel Hutz business card.
Oh,
he
yeah,
goes,
no money down.
No money down. He goes, no, look, I've got your business card. It says no money down. It says no, comma, money down,
Money down.
exclamation mark. Yeah, eats, shoots, and leaves. Yeah, that's
They got this all messed up. But yeah, so then that also... Yeah, led on, obviously, to talk about garbage being costumes and things. And also, so Donald Trump went to a tip. He went to a garbage processing place and
I don't know, man.
Hopped in a garbage truck. He wore a vest that matched his face, like the high vis.
Yeah, his face is already high vis.
Yeah. Oh, and I think it further made the bronzer worse. Maybe without the high vis on.
He's saying it's a white balance issue. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Like it's like they enhance each other. It's like, oh, that shirt brings out your eyes, like that kind of thing.
Your shirt really brings out the bronzer in your face.
Yeah, but it's just been getting. Yeah, just all this stuff that's happening in the past week is just insane. Like, everything stemming from the garbage comment. Just the jet setting around and being in all these different places at once, just begging people to see them as legitimate or to vote for them. We also got an October surprise. I thought we missed. I thought we missed out, but it seemed like on October 30, October 31, like transcripts from not transcripts, like recordings for one of the books about Trump. Oh, I forget which one it was. Like the Daily Beast picked it up, and I think the Guardian started reporting about it as well. Of like recordings of conversations with Jeffrey Epstein prior to his death, just talking about all the things he knew about the Trump White House.
Cool.
And so clearly they were close, and he had inside, not like Donald Trump was telling him shit. And so it's like, oh yeah, here's just more concrete information on the intimate relationship he had with renowned pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. It's like, yep, there's your October surprise.
And I tell you what, that's barely even broken through news-wise. But yeah, I feel like the Democrats have been probably behind that, are probably dripping that out, right in advance up to election day. Because there was another story about a woman who was like, who came out and told a story about how Donald Trump sexually assaulted her. She was like brought to him by Jeffrey Epstein.
Yes,
that was like a week ago.
The model.
Week or two ago.
Yeah.
So like clearly that, they've got this information, they're dripping it out on him. Or someone motivated to, take out Donald Trump is certainly. But the thing is like Donald Trump's actually running for president, whereas Joe Biden is not fucking running for president. So there's all of this like feigned outrage from the right-wing media and right-wing supporters saying, oh, they called us garbage. It's like, well, Kamala didn't. She's the one who's running for president. Like Joe Biden is just some guy. He's just.
I mean, I guess I know she's the VP, so it's like she's part of the administration, and like you'd say, oh, is it the view
and I
of
guarantee
the administration that we're all garbage. Like,
and I guarantee that Kamala's campaign is like, who let him out of the fucking box? Like, Joe, shut the fuck up.
Yeah, no. Or it's like, what, has he beaten Smash Brothers already? Like in Mario Kart, like, put him in a room, and just let him just like,
he needs to be sequestered until November 5th. Like, shut up, Joe. Shut up, old man. You will not ruin this for us.
Yeah.
And there was also the I'm the opposite of a Nazi comment. So he was saying, responding to. So he's been using this phrase a lot, the enemy from within. And then a bunch of intellectual Zambonis on the right wing have been cleaning up after him saying, no. He was referring to, the migrants that are criminals that he's going to do a mass deportation of. Apparently he's saying he's going to mass deport 20 million people. And the logistics of that are just nonsense and insane. But he goes, no. I was just saying the enemy within was illegal migrants that are here. And then Trump basically gets out in front of everyone that says, no, what I meant was the Democrats are the enemy from within. Like literally talks about like Adam Shifty Schiff and, like names specific Democrats and like journalists and calls them the enemy from within. It's like, that's literal Nazi stuff that you're parroting there.
People were trying to fix it for him, and he's no, that's not what I meant. It's like, no, like, it's like, says crazy thing. No, what he meant was less crazy thing. No, I meant the crazy thing.
I meant the fully insane thing. Yeah.
Let me just step over you there and say, like, I am definitely Hitler 2.0.
His surrogates were trying to do the classic intellectual Zamboni work of smoothing over his mistakes for the public, and he said, no, I fully meant the crazy thing. And also there was a report where his former chief of staff told the New York Times that Trump would rule like a dictator, and that while in office said that Adolf Hitler, quote, did some good things, unquote. And he wanted Hitler's generals. That was another comment that he made.
He wanted Hitler's generals.
Just like generals that were
very dead, my friend.
Extremely old and dead. But maybe it's like a Return of the King type scenario where their souls can't move on until they, pledge, until they come back and fight one last time.
Yeah, one big battle for the king. King of Germany? Like, what would...
I guess the Kaiser? Yeah, I don't know.
Go there, yeah.
But so a bunch of like very racist stuff. And then that has been, suggesting to people that the thing is the Kamala Harris campaign didn't even say that he's a Nazi. They just said like, hey, he's been on record saying that he wants Nazi generals that are completely unquestioning and like he admires, Nazis. They just said he like the true thing that has been reported that he admires Nazis. And he goes, I'm not a Nazi. I'm like the opposite of a Nazi. It's like, are you winning? Surely you can't be winning a campaign if you have to get up in front of a crowd.
Yeah.
8 days before election day and say, I'm the opposite of a Nazi. Surely that can't be the winning person.
It's the same as, was it Melania Trump made a rare public appearance sort of for this. And I think pulled a Mrs. Peter Dutton and gave us the quote of like, rather than he's not a monster, she said he's not Hitler. And it's one of those things of the fact that you felt the need to say that kind of legitimizes the point.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, getting up and saying he's not like Hitler makes me think maybe he's like Hitler.
Yeah.
I mean, I already thought that because of his words and deeds, but
he's not Hitler because, Hitler actually loved his spouse. It's just, unreal.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So these are the closing arguments. The Kamala Harris campaign says, we want to get out there. We want to fix up the tax system. We want to fix healthcare. We want to fix housing for Americans. We want to, we've got all these big plans as to things that we want to do. He's got he's got an enemies list. I've got a to-do list. I was like, perfect. And his closing argument is, I'm not a Nazi. I'm like the opposite of a Nazi.
I'm the opposite of a Nazi, but I want to round up all the foreigners into camps so as I can protest them to kick them out of the country.
Precisely. Yeah.
Not a Nazi though.
No.
Also, if I could have had some of those guys that like worked for the Nazis, that'd be great. But I'm not a Nazi.
And what we want to do is we want to get all the Mexicans into camps so they can concentrate on getting them out of the country. We'll call them concentration camps.
Like, just great. Oh yeah, I don't know if you watched the most recent episode of John Oliver's show last week tonight. Covering sort of the logistics of what a mass deportation like they're proposing would involve and how scary and awful that
so I heard
be.
Someone talking about this. Like, it costs on average around $15,000 to deport someone from the United States, just due to all the various people per person involved in every individual person's contact with the legal system. They need to have some sort of hearing. They get on a plane, they get on buses, they get moved around, they have temporary accommodations. All of this stuff costs money. To deport someone costs roughly, on average, $15,000. So if you're planning on extraditing, 5 million, 10, so the general consensus is that there's about 11 million people undocumented in America at the moment. And there's also complexity around that because, old Nonna, who's 80 years old, might be undocumented, but, her kids and her grandkids aren't undocumented, or, vice versa. Like, a kid who's here, who's in America, might be documented, might be a legitimate, citizen of America, but her parents might be undocumented. So it's like, also, what do you do? And the guy who was like the mass deportation czar person who was interviewed on 60 Minutes I saw recently. They asked him that question, like, what do you do when, you know, there's a person here who's a legitimate citizen, but both of her parents are, undocumented? Like, what happens to that person? Like, what's the eventuality that is going to happen? Because that's going to happen a lot. And he goes, oh, well, we've got a simple solution for that. You just deport the whole family. And I was like, no. So you're saying that citizens of the United States, naturalized citizens, are going to be also deported as part of this, you know, like it's just
they're going to be made stateless.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to but you don't have to wonder whether this is or is not constitutional. It is not. To be clear, not constitutional to just make naturalized citizens of your country stateless for no reason, for having committed no crime. Not a thing you can do. But yeah, it just like the amount of money and now they're arguing, Trump's arguing that it's like actually 21 million. And it's just like the amount of manpower that you would need to conduct that operation, doesn't exist, would constitute a massive increase in spending just in terms of manpower to the American government in order to be able to actually pull off this operation. The amount of like law enforcement agencies that would be taken off other tasks to help facilitate this would also cause other problems. And there's just the cost. If you think about, if you're deporting 1 million people, right, times 15,000, you're talking about
15,000 million,
$1.5 billion. Yeah. So it's $1.5 billion for every million people. So if you know what I mean? Like if it's 10 million, it's 15 billion.
Times.
Yeah. It's just like an insane amount of money that it would cost the American government, not to mention all the issues that it would cost with, it would cause with labor and the supply chain. They go, well, it's going to help raise naturalized American citizens' wages. And I was like, right. And that's the problem that we've been dealing with for the last 3 or 4 years. What happens when you do that? Inflation, because everything is now more expensive to produce. If everyone's wages go up, those houses that you're trying to build, you know, like it's just a nonsensical economic plan. It makes no sense whatsoever. And yet,
and that's before you consider the absolute fascist
forget the ethical quagmire shitstorm that would create. You know, all those situations, like I said, where
ripping families
but it's like kids in cages. That whole crisis times 1,000. Like it would be 1,000 times worse than what we dealt with. And yet, I asked ChatGPT this week to summarize what are the arguments for Trump's fascist tendencies, right? For and against. And it gave me a pretty good list. Cult of personality and leadership, anti-democratic actions and undermining institutions, attacks on the press and free speech, us versus them, nationalizing and scapegoating, disdain for the rule of law, paramilitary or street movement behavior, right? And there are some counter arguments which I found semi-compelling, economic and social policies, like he doesn't want a highly regulated nationalist kind of endeavor like other fascist regimes, lack of a coherent ideology. I think these are more issues of competence rather than, you know, like his like willingness to engage in fascism, but whatever.
He's a dumb fascist.
Yeah, he's just because he's not very good at being a fascist doesn't make him not a fascist. Like attempted murder is still a crime, even if you didn't succeed at doing it, but whatever. So it had some for and against. And I said, okay, tell me why people would vote for Trump over Harris. And ChatGPT said,
oh my God, this is the dystopian hellscape. You're asking the machine.
I was just curious because I know it's an aggregate of everything that's out there. So I wanted to see what people were saying. And, you know, number one for Trump's leadership, economic policies. Trump supporters highlight his record of tax cuts, deregulation, and economic growth before the COVID-19 pandemic. His administration focused on cutting corporate taxes and renegotiating trade deals, which many believe have fostered economic dynamism and job creation. And I said, hang on, I reject the idea that Trump's better on the economy. Didn't a bunch of economists sign a letter saying that Harris's plan was better? Her plan would lead to a $1 trillion deficit, whereas his would lead to $5 trillion. Also, universal tariffs on goods and mass deportations don't seem stabilizing for the economy and would increase inflation substantially, no. To which ChatGPT said, a recent survey of nearly 40 economists from leading institutions found that Kamala Harris's economic policies are likely to be less inflationary and generate smaller budget deficits than Donald Trump's platform, which is true. Specifically, the survey indicated that Trump's plan, which included several universal tariffs and immigration crackdowns, could result in greater economic instability, driving inflation and deficits higher. In contrast, Harris focuses on raising taxes on the wealthy, providing housing assistance, and restoring the child tax credit, which economists view as more fiscally sustainable and less inflationary. So I said, so why did you say Trump's better on the economy? Good point. I initially pointed out, tax cuts, yada, yada. However, as you correctly noted, a recent expert analysis strongly favors Kamala Harris's economic plan. And then there's a reference to a Newsweek article, talking about everything that I just said. So I said, so you're going to keep telling people that Trump's better on the economy, or...
Yeah, right.
He said, I'll make sure to align my responses for everyone with the most accurate information, including economic analysis from experts. So it's just like, it's interesting that bias that we have about Republicans being better on the economy is literally like baked into even the aggregate, the thing that collates all the aggregate responses, being ChatGPT, is literally also biased towards this thing, which even if you interrogate it like even just a modicum of interrogation of that concept actually falls apart under questioning. And there's cited sources, it goes in cite sources now in Newsweek and all these sorts of things that talk about, that big, it was like an open letter that a bunch of, industry leading economists came out and said that Kamala Harris's plan would be better on the economy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, if you interrogate it a little bit, it falls apart immediately under questioning. But like, I imagine a lot of people are, it's two things. I imagine a lot of people are relying on ChatGPT to come up with their perspective on this. And that's
I hope not.
Wrong. I guarantee you that they are. But also, what it tells me...
Then we're doomed. Then Skynet has happened. Like, this is the real Skynet. If we're asking ChatGPT who to vote for, and then you vote in Donald Trump, that's Judgment Day 1997. Like, that's essentially the same, just with more steps.
But what it tells me is the inputs that are feeding into this model are biased. For whatever reason, there's this perception out there in the community in America that Republicans and for some reason Donald Trump are better on the economy. When you spend 2 seconds interrogating that and saying, hey, like getting rid of all the cheap labor that the farm and manufacturing and housing construction sectors are predicated on, like maybe that's not a good idea for the economy. As soon as you interrogate it for 2 seconds, the whole thing falls apart. And yet that's clearly what a lot of Americans believe, because that's what ChatGPT is scraping and feeding and sort of, putting into its understanding about Trump.
Yeah, it depends. I guess it depends like what it has access to, like what it's
a bunch of stuff. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I know like paywalls can stop scraping for large language models and all that sort of stuff. So like,
apparently,
presumably it's going for its news sources and pulling headlines and articles and stuff. So depending what news sources it's going to, you're going to get the bias of the news sources.
That's true. Yeah. But I do remember hearing recently that there was an agreement signed between New York Times and ChatGPT specifically for the use of their writing to train ChatGPT's models. Like basically they're saying like, we're a content mill. We've spent 100+ years creating content. We'll give you access to our library of content and future content that we create for the purposes of training your models. And they're having reached some sort of compensation agreement for that. Yeah, so
10 years from now, they just go, cool. Well, now ChatGPT can just write all our content.
Can write all the articles and we can fire all the journalists. Yeah, that is a concern. So, okay, we've got a little bit more on Trump and then we'll let it go. I know we're 38 minutes in. There was one other thing that Trump said that was concerning. Well, not one other thing. I assume there was many things. One thing that came across my screen was him talking about his alignment with JFK Jr. with regards to issues on health. So he made this statement in front of a rally this week, saying that basically he would make RFK Jr. a kind of health czar with direct responsibility for the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention and other health-related outfits. So let's hear Trump say words.
Robert F. Kennedy cares more about human beings and health and the environment than anybody. And he's going to be absolutely, having him is such a great honor. I've been friends of his for a long time. And I'm going to let him go wild on health. I'm going to let him go wild on the food. I'm going to let him go wild on medicines. The only thing I don't think I'm going to let him even get near is the liquid gold that we have under our feet. I don't know, Elon, he might not like liquid gold. It's oil and gas, sometimes referred to as oil and gas. JD, I think we're going to have to keep him away from the oil and gas. What do you think, Howard? Yes? But where is Robert? He's around. He gave a beautiful speech. He's a great guy. He truly cares. I mean, he truly cares about this, and it's an honor.
Fucking hell.
The idea that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. would have anything to do with health policy in the Trump administration should be enough to get you, the American voter, freaked the fuck out about a Trump presidency. Like, that alone is incredibly concerning. This is the guy who's been a vaccine skeptic, who is directly responsible for
lack of vaccine uptake in where was it? Shit. No, I don't want to take it. Get it very wrong. I'm trying to remember where.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. It was responsible for something like 80-something deaths in there was an outbreak of
Polynesian country.
I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where. But that he he attended a conference and things like that and just espoused his anti-vax views, and so people didn't take up a vaccine and a lot of people died.
Super cool.
Also,
that guy's going to be in charge of stuff.
He's really, 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 really against autism. Like people having autism. I know he ties that into his anti-vax stance from that completely baseless and debunked theory of vaccines and autism being linked. But he just sees it as the worst possible thing that could happen to somebody, and it's not. People have autism. It's just a thing, and it's fine. So
cool and normal.
Fuck you, RFK Jr. And also, stop cutting the heads off whales. Just, it's weird that you did that. While the image of you strapping it to the top of a truck or of a van and driving it and all the bits like blasting in through the windows while driving is very, very
horrifying
funny
image.
Because fuck you, but don't do that.
He has spent years distorting vaccine science. I can't think of a worse possible. It was Samoa measles outbreak. Yeah, where it was he went there, spoke about vaccine hesitancy and vaccine skepticism, and then there was a malaria outbreak in Samoa, which ended up killing 80-something people, which a lot of people can say is directly attributed. He goes and he constantly says, "I never tell people not to take vaccines," but then obviously he's doing that. He's getting people to question the efficacy and drawing. I'm just asking questions. It's that whole methodology, right?
Yeah. You might not have said the words "don't take the vaccine," but you did sort of say the words of I don't know, maybe vaccines are bad.
Yeah. I mean, take them if you want to fuck your shit up, but
if you want to risk it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm sure people are going to feel, especially people with low scientific literacy, are going to feel great about taking vaccines after that. Yeah. So cool and normal guy.
Yeah.
I can't and that whole thing about linking autism to vaccines, which has been disproven again and again. He's still out there propounding that bullshit theory. I cannot think of a worse person than JFK. He is a truly I think a psychotic ideologue with regards to vaccines, and certainly America does not need more skepticism about vaccines, especially after the last 4 years and everything that we've been through.
Christ.
I really can't just
we
imagine.
saw in action the benefit of vaccines.
Yes. Yeah, we saw it live, how many people it saved. But if you talk to the
and
other side of the aisle, they'll talk about, some footballer keeled over and had some health event. Oh, it must be because of the vaccine. Anything bad that's ever happened to any healthy looking person since then, he got robbed at knife point. Oh, so he took the vaccine. It's
hit by a bus. Vaxxed?
Yeah, was he vaxxed?
Was he vaxxed?
It just
vaccine attracts buses.
It's just truly,
darkest
terrifying.
timeline. Yeah, absolutely terrifying. Couple that with Stephen Miller's mass deportation speech, which just felt like a straight up
Nazi rally.
speech.
Yeah, Stephen Miller, Santa Monica fascist. Stephen Miller is he's a real pig.
Absolutely crazy. And let's not get into it, but Elon Musk giving people $1 million a day to join his super PAC or whatever.
So
Crazy,
it was
and potentially not legal.
Potentially not legal. He's been taken to court. There was an injunction to get him to stop. He's still going because he's a billionaire. What are you going to do to him?
elections in a couple days. So
Yeah,
like,
and is like, which to my mind is election interference, right? You get a billionaire saying, "I'm going to give you $1 million to go and vote." So it was like him saying
to
it's
sign a petition, you
vote.
get into a lottery.
Yes, and the petition is like obviously very right wing coded. It's like, I vow to support the First and Second Amendments. It's like, well, who cares about the First and Second Amendments? Obviously, it's right wingers. So basically, he's using it as a way of driving it, sweepstakes for a kind of turnout machine for Republicans. And it's like, it's not clever, it's not subtle, it's definitely illegal. But the fact is, it's like, who's going to stop him if Trump gets
They're not
in?
going to stop him in the next 4 days.
Yeah, Trump's going to get in. If Trump gets in, then there's nothing they can do about it. If Kamala gets in, like, okay, I'll cop a fine or whatever. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's just like all of it's going to be after the fact and way too late,
Although he did say recently, as like at least I've seen people attributing this to him, whether or not he said
you can't pay people to vote.
Yeah,
like I know corruption is deeply embedded in this country at the moment, where it's like, super PACs and dark money and like all sort of manner of manipulating the democratic system in order to try and eventuate an outcome. But this seems like, here is a bag of money for voting. Like, it seems the most clear-cut example of like exactly what you should not be doing in order to interfere with an election in the favor of a billionaire psycho who's also apparently going to be appointed to some like, cutting the administrative state to ribbons commission. And he reckons he can cut $2 trillion out of the $5 trillion budget, and that it's going to cause chaos in the short term pain for long-term gain sort of thing. Like, that's the kind of talking that he's been saying about it. It's just nuts. It's properly nuts.
Yeah. So, all right, let's leave the US election behind. Don't vote for Donald Trump.
And obviously I don't assume anyone that listens to this podcast is like a swing voter or voting for Donald Trump. But if you are a person who lives in the United States, I did call all of you idiots earlier. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. But, that if you are a person who is in America who has yet to vote, if you know people in any of those swing states, call them, text them, get them out to vote. Go to votesaveamerica.com, which is an organization which is, dedicated to turning out the vote. There are ways, there's still things you can do, right? So up until the very day of election day, there's still things you can knock on doors, you can call people, you can text people in your network that it's all about turnout at this stage. It's not about persuasion anymore. No one's going to change their mind at this stage. It's literally just about making sure that if you know any Democrats anywhere, especially in the swing states, fucking drive them to the polls, do whatever you have to do to get those people out to vote, because the world, the rest of the sane world is begging you not to fuck this up again. Do not elect Donald Trump again, for the love of God.
Yeah. This is honestly the crossroads, I feel, of history. It's very terrifying.
Yeah.
Do not vote for Donald Trump. Okay.
All right.
We'll tune into America in a week when we know how bad it all is. So moving over to Australia, where we know a bit more about what's kind of going on there.
Speaking of dark money in politics.
Yeah. So, all right, let's start this one from the top, because it got a little insane. From the top,
Australia was federated in 1901.
Oh, yeah, okay, 1901.
That's when Australia started. Don't pay attention to any of the 60,000 years of contiguous Aboriginal history before that.
A bit earlier than that, a bunch of white guys all turned up on boats and were met with streamers and cake.
Yep.
And it was all wonderful and
we
great.
were invited.
And before that,
punch was served.
Dead silence.
No one was there. They were greeted enthusiastically by no one, because no one was there. Terra nullius.
No, they were enthusiastically greeted by people who just magically appeared then. They weren't there prior. It was never their land. There was maybe a dingo or two.
Okay.
Nothing else was there.
That's a relief.
No, why are you asking? No, actually, no. Okay. More recently, so someone, I forget who, doesn't matter, wrote a book, and in this book said that our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, had used their close relationship with the former CEO of the airline Qantas, Alan Joyce, to get free upgrades on flights. And they, that is a bad allegation. That's like, conflicts of interest and, minister gifts undeclared, all that sort of stuff. Anyway, the point is, Albanese, denies the shit out of this. And from what I've seen, I don't think there's any real like evidence that it did happen. It was just in this book, and the allegation was made, and it set off this shitstorm of, well, I say it set off a shitstorm. It set off Peter Dutton, who in turn started a shitstorm.
Created a
Peter
shitstorm.
Dutton, the opposition leader, of course, like went hard on this, being like, you know, ministerial gifts, this is potentially corrupt behavior, like all this sort of stuff. To which people said, haven't you flown on the private jet of Gina Rinehart, Australia's richest woman and fossil fuel magnate? You want to say anything about that, Peter? And Peter has said, yes, I've flown on the private jet before, but and he's like, you know, emphatically came out and said, I have never asked Gina Rinehart if I can use her private jet. I've never done that. Yes, I have flown on her private jet when invited, but I have never solicited the use of the private jet. And then a little bit later in the week said, I have been informed that one time my staff did ask Gina Rinehart, could I borrow her plane because I couldn't borrow one of the ones from the Royal Air Force. My bad. And started that sort of shitstorm. But also during the week,
you think if you lived, people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
No,
you think
they shouldn't.
Peter knows how many fucking private jet flights he's taken on Gina Rinehart. You know what I mean? He knows in his head, and still he was like, "No way, this could go wrong for me. I'm going to attack Albo on this."
No, who else was like that? Shadow Transport MP Bridget McKenzie was like, I have never, ever taken a flight upgrade. Never, ever, never, never have I taken a flight upgrade. And then later in the week said, okay, I've been informed.
Yes,
no, I have had some flight upgrades. I have taken them before, and I'm going to keep... I shouldn't have been so emphatic when I said that. My bad. And it's just become this... like fucking yes minister chaos week of everyone saying they've never done a thing, and then they've all discovered they have done the thing when they fucking check the diary, and they've all had to correct themselves all over just something that may not have even happened. Like I don't know, just the kind of the fucking hole that Peter dug himself into, and then by proxy other ministers of the opposition into.
It's such nonsense though, because each one of them knows, like, there's a similar sort of thing. There was the Garm drama over in the UK, similar sort of thing where Keir Starmer and members of his government had been revealed that they'd been accepting a lot of freebies from various moneyed interests, that donors to the Liberal Party, free tickets to football club matches and expensive travel and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, I obviously don't think it's good. Obviously, it is allowed as long as you declare it, which seems like crazy to me. I don't think it seems like an obvious conflict of interest to be accepting gifts and money and not money, but like gifts of value from various interests. Seems like an obvious conflict of interest, shouldn't be allowed. But it's the thing that we do, and given, especially looking at this openpolitics.au, which is a fantastic website, which has a lot of public information about politicians publicly available. And if you look at Peter Dutton's, we'll post this in the show notes. If you look at Peter Dutton's register of interests, sponsored travel or hospitality where the value exceeds $300, you'll see a pretty lengthy register of gifts that he has received over the years. The most recent one, 22nd of the 10th, travel 13th of October, Sydney to Bathurst return, courtesy of the Liberal Party of Australia, like things that are, tickets and hospitality, Bathurst 1000, courtesy of V8 Supercars, tickets and hospitality, 6th of October 2024, NRL final, courtesy of the NRL. Like, it is pretty rich. And it goes all the way down, dozens of entries back to just 2022. This is the stuff he's declared publicly. Okay. There are lots of the irony of someone who clearly accepts freebies on a regular basis, from what I can tell, based on publicly available information, to turn around and criticize the Prime Minister for doing the exact same thing. It's like, I know it's not like fun or interesting or new or particularly revelatory to note the hypocrisy of the Liberal Party when it comes to things like this, but like, I don't know, I'm still uniquely disappointed every time it happens. Like it's still, disappointing afresh each time. So, like when, Peter Dutton called Anthony Albanese a political lifer. He's been around for 30 years. He's disconnected from the Australian people. It's like, checks notes. Haven't you, Peter Dutton, been around for 26 years?
Yeah, it's like going on 30 years.
Didn't you first run for election when you were in your 20s? Like you're a fanatical member of the Young Liberals your entire life. Like the cynicism of knowing that you're lying and being a liar and being completely full of shit, and then like two-faced, completely cynically turning around and saying the opposite thing to the public because it'll benefit you for a slight moment. Like the idea of someone like that getting into power is actually crazy. Like that is genuinely extremely concerning to have, it's like Dexter or someone like that, the character, someone who could just lie to you completely sociopathically and say with a completely straight face, completely earnestly, like, no, I didn't kill all those people and dump them in the river. Like, the amount of psychopathy that it takes, to be able to just like turn off any of those morals and ethics in order to be able to lie because it advantages you in the moment is deeply concerning. And like, like just 2 weeks ago, he was having a go at Anthony Albanese for buying a $4 million house. But like Peter Dutton's property portfolio is rumored to be worth $300 million. You know what I mean? Like he exited.
But he didn't buy any of them during the cost of living crisis, Joe.
No, certainly not.
No.
Certainly not.
When I did it, it was cool.
When, regularly I'm in the market for $4 million properties in Sydney's northern beaches, but like, cost of living crisis, how are people going to afford their, 4-bedroom, $4 million house? It is not lost on me that someone who is reportedly in a position of such privilege can turn around and stick the boot in to Anthony Albanese on something that's like not a crime. Like the guy's earning $500,000 a year, is buying a $4 million house. Like I'm sure a lot of people in Australia would go, geez, that'd be bloody nice, but it's not a crime. It's not illegal. It's not even a conflict of interest. It's just like, it just looks bad. Like, and for him to stick the boot in, knowing that he is worth, at the very worst, tens of millions of dollars, being at the head of this, property investment portfolio empire, like specifically to do with real estate, when he's sticking the boot in about cost of living and housing, and like, it's just so disgusting. Like, I don't know how you can keep a straight face. He sucks.
I think just maybe not having a soul.
That's what it is. Like, I don't think he's an actual sociopath. Like, I don't think he's like cutting heads off or anything, but like there is an element of like sociopathy in someone's ability to be able to just lie and misrepresent and just completely cynically say whatever needs to be said, do whatever needs to be done without a second thought about morality or ethics or consequences or hypocrisy. Like it is a level of like Machiavellianism, which we haven't seen in Australian politics in some time. And I find it extremely concerning.
Oh, just who wants to run for politics? I feel
it's only psychos, right? Like
you
has
have
to
be. You either have to be, or eventually you will become.
It makes you
kind of like hypocrisy, like because otherwise.
Yeah, we all saw the pictures of young fuckable Albo in his idealistic days in the 80s. Where he was on doing student protests and all that sort of stuff. He was, he was the lefty classic
campaigning to free Palestine.
Was that the student protest back in the day?
I believe, he was big into like freeing Palestine. How the turntables.
So I mean, obviously that guy, after 30 years in politics, there's something that going through the Australian political machinery does something to you, does change you, obviously. And yet I still find that there is a significant difference between Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton in that respect.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%.
And now they're like neck and neck. Seems like if the election were held tomorrow, Albo would lose. Labor would certainly lose ground to the Liberal Party, and they might even lose an election, which is crazy after the historic defeat that the Liberals had at the last election.
Well, Albo's fucking squandered it.
That's what it seems like.
Like fucking today. Actually, I had not put this in the rundown, but today
we'll do it live.
He essentially he just put out a thing saying a re-elected Labor government will cut student loan debt by 20%. And my first thought was, dickhead, you're in charge now.
You could do that now.
Do it now.
Yeah. Rather than
it's something worth
waiting
doing,
to get elected.
fucking do it now. You are in, like, the things that you want to do them.
Do good shit for people, and then they might turn around and vote for you.
Yeah.
Rather than
Like,
say, oh, we might do something good if you re-elect us, and then when we get there, we go, oh, it's too close to an election. We don't want to squander our political capital.
Yeah,
If you vote
like,
us in next time, then maybe we'll consider doing the good stuff, and on ad infinitum.
Yeah, like, fucking dickhead, do it. You absolute disappointment.
Yeah.
Speaking of disappointments, the Victorian Greens had a disappointment this week, where the leader of the Victorian Greens has suspended one of their MPs because they had serious allegations of inappropriate behaviour. Said inappropriate behaviour being having
he was suspended and then he resigned.
Yes,
from the Greens, Victorian Green
so
Party.
kind of, you can't fire me, I quit. No, but we already fired you. We already suspended you.
Yeah.
So you're kind of not quitting. You're already suspended. Yeah. Anyway, but I believe they're still actually going to stay on as an independent MP.
Correct. Yeah.
In their seat. Sam Hibbins is who we're talking about. Sam Hibbins, who's been the Victorian Greens member for Paran in Melbourne for the last 10 years. Like, he's held the seat for 10 years, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, he had a relationship with one of his staff. So, yes. So when I first read this last night,
so he's qualified to be Deputy Prime Minister, right?
Oh, yeah. All he needs to do is lie on the ground in Braddon in the ACT, and you're good to go.
All he needed to do was impregnate her and start a second family, and then he could become Deputy Prime Minister. There you go.
Well, so I was reading this news from our rundown last night on the couch, and I was sitting with my wife, and I was like, oh, man, like, because my initial take was, a Greens member has resigned over, like, having a relationship with a staff member. Like, God damn it, why do they always, like, I sounded like you a bit, George. Why do the guys on the left have to have integrity and step down? Like, you could have
kind of had that feeling.
In power. Like, God damn it, fucking hell. Like, geez, man. And then I got to the sentence, the 42-year-old is married and has 2 children. I'm like, oh, it was an affair. It was an affair.
Well, do we know it was an affair? Because he said he's married and has 2 children now. But he also said that the relationship, which was consensual with this staffer, but obviously he's in a position of authority over and above her, which makes it inappropriate. But he said that the relationship, which was consensual, had been over for some time. So it was like, this short relationship ended some time ago, but it does breach our party room rules.
I mean, yeah.
So
but like,
does that mean that it preceded his marriage? Because there's nothing in the article which says that it's an allegation of him having cheated on his wife. But he also said he was stepping back to spend more time with his family, which normally means you're in the doghouse, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, stepping down to spend more time with family, kind of.
Who no longer wants me around.
Yeah, but I was just a bit like yeah, you're right. I suppose I'm leaping to a bit of an assumption there, saying that these things were happening at the same time.
We don't know one way or the other.
Don't know one way or the other. The way, at least, I felt it was framed by the story gave that impression when I got to that point halfway through. So the whiplash I had, I was just sitting with my wife, being like, "Oh no, all right, turn around. That was bad."
I am like, if it is a case where it is just a case where someone who is in a more senior role in a consensual relationship, like, I'm kind of sympathetic to that. Like, yes, it was a violation of the party room rules, and then based off that, I suppose he needs to step down. But yeah, you're right, Tom. Like,
time ago, preceding his marriage and all that sort of stuff. Then we're talking
years ago, potentially.
A decade. Yeah. Like,
well, he's been in for 10 years, so like it could have been in his first year.
Could have been yonks ago.
Yeah, so it does. Provided that obviously it was a consensual relationship, and and there was no infidelity or anything like that. I don't know. I'm kind of sympathetic to that. Like, yes, you probably shouldn't date your subordinates, but like, people meet people at work all the time. If you're in your early 30s and there's other people in their early 30s, you're unpartnered. Like, I don't know. I personally, as long as you're not exercising your authority in such a way as to preference or not preference particular people, or, preference them for advancement or not. Like, I don't know. These politicians spend a lot of time at work, man. The only people they know are people at work. Like, they're not getting out for a lot of like socializing. If you're doing really busy, hardcore, like, 50, 60-hour weeks, which seems to be the culture of, I don't know about Victorian Parliament, but certainly Parliament in Canberra, seems like hard work, hard play kind of culture. Then, like, where do you have time to meet people on?
I mean, true. But I think there's also, though...
I'm just saying not every workplace relationship is automatically exploitative just because one person is more senior than the other. That's all I'm saying.
But I think, though, there's a certain... It's the level of seniority, like I was saying before.
That's
like
true. And it depends on the rules.
My wife and I met at work.
If the policy is you can't do it, then you can't do it. Like, if it's regardless of the ethical implications, then you're out. Like,
my wife and I, we met at work. I was not technically a superior, and I wasn't a manager or anything, but I was
you'd been there longer,
and she was a casual and newer. So there was still at least that kind of level of thing. But, like, for example, the Barnaby Joyce thing with his now wife and the second family, like, she was one of his employees. Like, he's the boss.
Staffer, yeah.
Like, it wasn't like my wife and I meeting at work in a retail store where I'm the one I see,
the store manager or whatever.
Kind of thing. Like, I feel it's that sort of difference, right? Like, kind of when you're the MP, like, you're the dude in that office.
I still think it's possible to have a relationship in that context that is not exploitative, but I agree it is. Yeah, you're also that's that expression. Don't should I say don't shit where you eat is the expression.
That expression.
That's okay to say.
I thought it was very strange. Don't shit where you eat. I'm neither shitting nor eating in whatever we're talking about. Like, yes, I know it's you're mixing the metaphor of, like, because your animals don't.
You want to keep your lives separate. The business and the personal. I get that.
I am neither planning to shit nor eat
nor eat
the person.
Yes.
I mean, you know what?
Let's not. But I guess. Yeah, I recognize that it can lead to situations that are exploitative and obviously sexual harassment in the workplace, especially within the context of Parliament and public service is like a thing that we've talked about a lot over the last couple of years. So I understand that it's a violation of the policy and he broke the rules, so he needs to step down. The thing is, he's still going to be a member of Parliament because he was duly elected by his constituents. So what does it change? Does it mean that he's not going to caucus with the Greens? Okay, but he's still probably going to vote with them anyway. Like, what does it really change? And it does annoy me a little bit that on the left, we hold ourselves, as you say, Tom, to maximum accountability. And yet, like, Barnaby Joyce is like, I got a new wife now, so what? Like, suck eggs, come at me. Like, I got kicked. Right? Didn't he get kicked out of Parliament for not being a citizen? And then he's just like, and then I got elected again, so none of it fucking matters. Like, hey.
Yeah, he was caught up in all that.
Like, if it's good enough for the Deputy Prime Minister, then it should be good enough for a state, for a Victorian MP. But
yeah, you'd think so.
It's I don't know. The right has no standards, and we have to hold ourselves to the highest ones. It just seems like we unilaterally disarming to some extent. But I'm glad we have principles. I don't know.
Yeah, it's good to have principles, but yeah.
Speaking of someone who has limited principles, Chris Ellison. So Chris Ellison is... Oh, the article's gone away. How dare you?
Disgusting.
Okay. Chris Ellison is a mining billionaire. And he had essentially a number of years between 2003 to 2014 where there were questions around his tax situation, his tax returns. And it emerged recently that there was an investigation into the conduct of the ATO, the Australian Tax Office, who sort of investigated these claims and then essentially settled with Chris Ellison for those claims. Now, rather than being particularly laborious, the settlement actually ended up being a discounted settlement. So about 80% of what was owed to the tax office was not ultimately recovered as part of the settlement. So basically he sent a lawyer in there, said negotiate with the ATO, and they said, we'll give you 20% of what was initially supposed to be paid as a result of these, as a result of tax evasion. I don't know how else you can sort of describe it. So there was a number of different sort of elements to it. So in 2007, the ATO wrote to him saying he wanted to discuss his personal tax return spanning, quote, a number of years. Okay, he didn't stop doing what he was doing. Yeah. The accounting firm that provided Ellison's personal tax services also acted as auditor for several of his companies, including Mineral Resources, the one for which he's most known, the multi-billion-dollar mining and mining services business that he took public in 2006. So the idea that the firm that's providing your personal tax return services is also the one auditing your business, like those should be Chinese walled from each other. Those should be two completely separate firms doing those activities, because there's a natural conflict of interest in terms of minimizing your personal tax, which is their objective for you as their personal client, versus holding your company to an objective set of like accountable measures, which is what an auditing firm does. So in a lot of firms, they've separated these functions entirely. Auditing firms are now like, there are places that are just auditing firms. That's all they do. We do auditing. We don't do any other business, to insulate ourselves from exactly these kind of allegations, because there's a conflict of interest. If you're my client and I'm trying to do better for you versus I'm your client and I'm also trying to, you're my client and I'm trying to also hold you accountable, like those two things are in tension and could create a conflict of interest. Ellison and other senior executives used a company based in the British Virgin Islands to also buy machinery cheaply and then on-sell it at large markups to Mineral Resources, his own company, which dudded shareholders for more than $7 million. So basically saying there's an offshore company that's also owned by me. It's going to buy this machinery and I'm going to sell it to myself at a large markup. And then that way you're not showing any profit, right? If I buy this machinery and I sell it to myself at cost and I've got all this money left over at the end of the year, then I'll be taxed 30% on that money. Whereas if I pump up the price and sell it for just about whatever I make, because you can decide the price because you're selling it to yourself. So I sold it to myself for a really high amount, right? And then, all of a sudden, turns out there's no money left over. I don't need to pay 30% corporate tax on that. So it's, so it's a really, it's grubby. But, these are all reported out by the...
clever accounting.
And this is, look, like to be perfectly clear, this is more or less what accounting firms exist to do, is to minimize the tax burden of their clients. Like there are things that he and his executives did here which are not legal, and some things which are in a gray area, but a lot of these things are like perfectly legal to do, right? Which is the scarier part of it, is that if you have the right representation, if you have the right firms batting on your behalf, you can do these things more or less with impunity. And the argument that this article makes is that if you can then turn around and send a lawyer in there to dicker down the fine that you pay as a result of this to the extent to which you're paying a fifth of what you would otherwise have paid if you actually paid your tax properly and didn't undertake these evasion schemes, well, not only is that not a punishment, it's actually a perverse incentive to get you to do these things again. It's not if I should have paid $100 million in tax, for example, and I only paid $20 million, my fine, quote unquote, is $20 million. Well, I'm $18 million better off. So like, why wouldn't I do it again? Why wouldn't you encourage everyone to do it? Even if you get caught, there's no real consequences, right?
Yeah. Even if you get caught, you'll pay less tax than if you did the goody two shoes thing.
Then you did if you did the right thing. And the thing that's really cooked about all of this, and this article from the Saturday paper goes into it in some detail, so I'll link it in the show notes. I encourage everyone to read it. Is that it also talks about how the ATO agreed to be bound by a confidentiality agreement with regard to these settlements. So they've said, okay, we're not going to tell anyone, including other government agencies like ASIC, who might have an interest in knowing that Chris Ellison and his company have been avoiding tax. unless there's an open investigation. So it's like, but how would ASIC know to open an investigation if you don't pass on the information to them?
Yeah, if you don't pass on, if you don't represent the material to them, like that.
If you don't tell them,
a fucking royal commission to a prosecutor,
hey, we think there might be a crime being committed. Do you want to investigate? How are they going to know? So it's like, if it comes up organically, but like we're not going to mention it. I don't know. For the life of me, I don't know. Maybe they had the best fucking lawyers in the world. I cannot imagine a situation where you could send a lawyer into the ATO and get them to stay quiet about the action that they've undertaken on you and then bind them legally to that. That guy's a fucking negotiation wizard. He deserves a raise.
Oh, wow.
It's
probably be cheaper to pay the tax than to pay what that guy's worth.
That guy's retained is big. His big. But and it creates this very gross, perverse incentive to essentially, dodge the tax system. And then even if you do get caught, you won't pay a big fine. And even if you do pay a big fine, doesn't matter because no one else is ever going to find out about it unless it comes out in the AFR. Like, just an absolutely thoroughly cooked story about how the ATO is basically running a protection racket for rich assholes. And they've done this in other instances as well. There was an investigation. I forget the details, but there was another investigation in there where, the same thing. Where the ATO is essentially staying stum about all of these allegations and not telling other inquiries, about things that are going on. And for the life of me, I can't understand. I mean, the ATO is a huge organization. The justification in the Saturday paper says, this is essentially the ATO hasn't got the resources to go after really big clients, really big tax dodging schemes, because these are, as you can imagine, incredibly complex investigations that take a number of months to uncover and unwind and go through all these sorts of things. And yet, every tax time you see articles in the paper saying like, the ATO's
this is what they're going to crack down.
They're going to crack down on working from home expenses. And it's like, me as a middle income earner, what I claim for my fucking desk chair, I'm sorry, like will not move the needle, but it's easy to do, right? The ATO can audit me like that, and it's not going to cost them really anything to be able to do that. And and if they do that in aggregate across a bunch of taxpayers, thousands of taxpayers, they will probably recover millions more dollars than if they did nothing, right? But I would argue the people that are cheating the system out of millions of dollars at a time should be the ones that they are investigating, right? Like, it seems completely pointless. It just shows how there's a different system of justice for those in the upper classes versus those in the lower classes, where you can get an 80% negotiate. Like, if I cheat on my taxes, not only do I have to give it all back, I pay a fine, and there's a red flag next to my name for the rest of my life saying, George is a tax cheat. Make sure you check on him and audit his shit. The audit process rips you a new asshole to try and, uncover everything you've ever done in your life, every donation receipt, every little expenditure to make sure it's all legit. But if you're a billionaire, if you're a mining guy, well, all of a sudden, just give us 20% and she'll be right. And we make sure we never tell anyone about it. Like, it just shows the perverse incentives. And I think the ATO absolutely has the resources to go after the big fish if they want. There just needs to be the courage of, they need to have the courage of their convictions to properly resource teams to go after that. To me, it makes no sense going after the little guy. You need to go after the big fish, and you need to make an example out of them. Because if these people were being taxed properly, maybe all of a sudden you don't walk away with 75 grand a year after tax. Maybe you walk away with 80 grand a year after tax. If everyone else is being taxed correctly, maybe you can pay a lower marginal tax rate. People go, oh, who cares? It's a billionaire. He's a business guy. I like smart business guys. Smart business guys get out of paying tax, right? It's like, well, it affects you because it means you're now having to subsidize them. They are paying a lower rate of tax, and who has to make up the shortfall? Well, it's us. It's the middle people who can't hire an army of lawyers and get them to run interference to the ATO for us. Like, it's us that gets screwed. The amount of dollars that we all have in our pocket is less now as a result of them because it's subsidizing Chris Ellison.
Yeah, if the billionaire who would not notice the difference of the dollar value changing if he actually paid his taxes, paid their tax correctly, you wouldn't need to pay as much. Person who keeps like fucking,
I know who these internet weirdos are.
Voting in liberal governments saying they're strong economic managers on the idea of lowering our taxes. It's like, so if you could fucking do that if by, I don't know, taxing the rich.
Yeah, taxing them correctly. I'm not even saying raise the taxes. I'm just saying have them pay the appropriate amount of tax that they owe.
Close the loopholes.
Yeah. So that was an interesting story. Like I said, we'll link that in the show notes. But I understand that comedically it's not the best thing to end on. So we're going to finish on Russia has fined Google more money than there is in the entire world.
Oh, we're skipping the monkeys.
We can skip. It's a math story. We're not here for math. And we've
we've
just done 15-minute on math stories.
So we're going to talk about what is it? A decillion, an octillion. What's the fucking number?
Google has been fined 2 undecillion rubles or $20 decillion, which, if you're keeping track, is more money than exists in the world.
Yes, I believe by some margin.
A large factor. So Russia has slapped Google with a fine so large that it outranks the world's entire gross domestic product. So a Russian court has ruled that Google must compensate for its block on 17 Russian state media channels broadcasting on YouTube to the tune of 2 undecillion rubles. That's 2 followed by 36 zeros or 20 US decillion, which is 33 zeros. If they refuse to pay the fine, it's going to go up to a Google, which is, I don't know, it seems like a missed opportunity that you should find Google or Google right off the bat. But
Putin, come on, you open with that. You're suing Google or Google. That's the headline. That's the virality of this story. You're an idiot for many reasons, but this is one of them.
Of course, it is not against US law for a private company to have terms of service and allow certain users onto their platform or not. But it's just a little shot across the bow from Russia to say, hey, Google, you're not going to make any money out of us. If you're going to deny us our propaganda channels to help us try and influence the US election, then you can't do business in Russia anymore, basically is what they're saying. So, which is pretty dumb.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's also just, I think the thing about this story that's wild is just a shit ton of zeros, and just seeing people put them in the headlines is like, come on, man. Are you sure that's the right number of zeros? I'd love all the sub editors.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
how many?
10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Fuck, I got to start over.
Yeah, see? It's crazy. No, just paste that thing into Notepad and then highlight only the zeros. It'll tell you how many characters it's highlighted.
US $20 trillion.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's a lot. That's a lot of
it's too much.
A lot of smackos.
That's a $900 dues.
I think they did the exchange change into dollary dues, but it's a number I'm not going to try to pronounce.
It's 31. It's lots of zeros.
I'm not even going to try. There's a lot of zeros, but a lot of other numbers as well, because exchange rates are funny.
You could tell the maths, the nerds over at the ABC were very excited to put this article together with lots of zeros and the quintillions and the decimal places moved out and things like that.
Yeah. People were shouting around the offices all over the country being like, what number is, like, how do you say that many zeros? Because, like, you got a billion and then 1,000 billions a trillion, or is a billion a trillion? It's like, it depends if you British, or you like, there's 1,000 million.
Is it a British undecillion?
Yeah, there's a US billion and there's a UK billion, which are different. Made it very confusing reading one of Stephen Hawking's books once. Because when he talks about a billion, it's bigger than a US billion.
It's a big old billion.
Yeah. Crazy. Anyway, so Russia's memeing? Is that what they're doing? They're memeing?
I think they're just having a lol. I don't think this is a serious. I mean, obviously they're aware that nothing's ever going to happen to it, or they're trying to draw attention to it. I don't know. I feel like the Russians just troll, man. I don't think they really care about anything. They're just just want to clown Google.
Yeah, this ABC article is accompanied with the smuggest picture of Putin I think I've seen in a while. So, like, yeah.
And that's saying something because he's pretty high on the smuggometer normally.
Indeed.
On that note, the next time that you hear our sweet dulcet tones will be after the US election. We will likely have a results by then. So either we will be cheering or hanging our heads in shame for the American people. Either way, be safe out there to our American listeners. Be kind to each other, and don't vote for Donald Trump.
No,
I think it's
don't
pretty.
vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah. God, he's a piece of shit. All right. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you follow us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that are ruining the world, like Twitter, that have, do, or ever will exist at our handle at Unnatural Show. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and mother flipping TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Twitter and Instagram at George Sipos.
You can follow me on Twitter at Tom D. Heath.
And you can follow us all down to the ballot boxes in Oregon that were set on fire. Don't set ballot boxes on fire. Please don't do that. It's like we would like to just like keep a country. Please do not descend into the film Civil War. I would like that very much.
Yeah. Say,
oh, fingers crossed. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't believe, George, you're leaving them on a story of Russia and very large numbers when it could have been a story about monkeys, Shakespeare, and the heat death of the universe being the last thing that we leave people with. But
okay.
Google it yourselves, guys.
Or don't. Thanks for listening, guys. Yeah. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.
All three of my favorite things in one story.